Today we're gonna take a look at the video A Taste of New York.
Sexy.
So hello friends and welcome back to a new video. If you're new to this series, my name is Florian, and in this series right here, I'm breaking down and analyzing some of your favorite videos to break down and explain the editing techniques from your favorite creators so that you can learn something and improve your videos in the future. Today we're gonna look at a very special video. So many of you have been sending that in to me and asking me to explain some of the effects that they've been using in that video. And so today we're gonna be doing exactly that. So if you haven't seen the video before, as always, click the link in the description, go and watch it on their channel first. It's now got over like 1.2 million views, I think, by now. And let me tell you, those are well deserved. So, A Taste of New York, let's jump over to the computer and get it started. So even like the first 5 to 10 seconds, they're so in your face that you cannot help but being flashed right away. And if you're working on any special video for yourself, that's probably one of the best ways to hook someone in the very first seconds. Like you got 5 to 10, 15, maybe 30 seconds at max to really catch them. And that's what that video is doing right away. Let's look at the intro again. So it starts with this super fast forwarded clip, and you see a lot of motion blur outside here, flying towards the Empire State Building, and there's a lot of motion blur. And then it rotates and goes into another drone shot that is orbiting around the Empire State Building. And you see on the outside, it's so blurry. And that really sells that effect of rotating around, and in the middle they kept it sharp and in focus so that you only look at that building. And then here they use a transition where it zooms in and then turns over to the right, and then it's so blurry that you don't recognize anything. And it goes into the next shot. And that's another drone shot that is fast forwarded. You see how fast the boat goes down here. And another fancy transition with a lot of motion blur, and then goes into a hyperlapse around the clock. And because it was already in a rotating movement, do you see that here? It's already rotating, and then it pans to the left super quickly. A lot of blur. Here, those 3 or 4 frames. You don't see the cut because it's going so fast and so blurry. And here's that cut, and that's how it looks slowly. And then this time lapse, super cool. I mean, how cool was that? Look at this one here. I really liked it from how it's fading from day to night. And pay attention here. I thought first that it would be one long time lapse, or that they kept the camera in the same position, but they didn't. They just chose a similar spot, because if you look at the buildings, you see that here they fade over the shot, and here you see that the buildings are on another spot. So that means that they came back at night, of course, at a somewhat similar spot. You see here that it's a super wide angle lens that they filmed this with, otherwise they wouldn't have been able to get so much in the frame. And then maybe it could be that they have something like time-lapse timers. So for example, for a GoPro, where you can put the camera on top, and then it's a counter, you can put it on 30 minutes, and then it's like an egg timer where it slowly rotates. This is how that looks to me. And then fancy transition, another time lapse, and then this shot is really cool. What I was really wondering with this shot here is that, look at this. First of all, obviously it's a time lapse. It's super cool how you have the motion blur here of the car. So that means that they took it as pictures with a long exposure. That's the reason why the lights are so blurry. So with maybe like half a second of shutter speed. But then again, the camera is moving, and I'm wondering how they achieved that, especially considering that here you see that the camera is moving quite a fair bit, because otherwise you wouldn't start seeing that building behind here. So you see that the buildings are shifting. This means the camera must move a fair bit more to the right. Must have had it on a slider, or did they do it as a hyperlapse with a drone? I have absolutely no idea. Super cool. And then here, this one definitely is on the slider, right? So from here you see that here in the foreground, the camera is slowly moving to the right, and that you simply achieve by putting the camera on a slider, having 2 tripods or one heavy duty one, and then having a motorized slider, and then they've taken pictures. It's not a video, it's pictures with long exposure that they then turned into a time-lapse video. Super cool. Fancy transition. Here again, they repeatedly do that, from having that same exact shot at a daytime and then at nighttime. And then listen to the sound effects. They go very crazy on the sound effects in this entire video. And that really gives you that vibe, feeling like you're actually there. And if that's not like the pure Caseyest of Casey songs ever, then I don't know what. Here again, with this shot for example, It must be a drone shot, or they must have been in a helicopter. The entire shot keeps the focus here, and then it's fast forwarded a lot. And then comes a fancy transition here that is so blurry that you don't see anything. Here again, the same thing, super wide angle lens. It's definitely taken with pictures. This is not a video file. Look at the lights here where you see that this was shot with a very closed aperture, but the picture is very, very bright. So that means that it must have been a photo with very long exposure. And again, that motion, during that entire time lapse, they must have made that slow motion up to the lights here. And then the sound effect in the back. That makes so much of a difference, right? If those sound effects wouldn't be there, it wouldn't be so engaging, it wouldn't draw you in so much. Here, just a very slow zoom out, just to give that a little bit of extra interest. That, by the way, is a good technique when you don't have enough shots in your video, but you want to spice it up a bit, and then you want to keep one shot for a couple of seconds. Then what you can do to make it more interesting, you can make a zoom in, zoom out. Then you don't need to cut and go to a new shot if you don't have enough recorded. And then it slowly zooms in, and then from here, it goes into another hyperlapse. And this one's also so cool. Oh no, this is actually a time lapse that slowly zooms into the clock and now zooms back out. Very wide angle. And then, did you see when it was zooming in here? So this is a zoom transition from one shot, very wide shot, to another very close shot. And while it does the transition, it does this kind of... Do you see it? You can buy those transitions in packs. You can also recreate them yourself if you want to. And that is so cool how it's tracking down exactly. The clock visor is standing exactly in the middle and keeps standing straight. And they follow it into the next one. Such a cool transition. Here again, another time lapse. And as before, they change from day to night. And here again, long exposure. So you see, there's a couple of techniques they've been using here that they just keep repeating and repeating. And also here again, listen to the sound effects. You really feel like you're there. And then when the transition comes, it just... And then again, the fancy whoosh transition to the red. And then it has this... This shot's so cool. It looks super, super good. And here, especially the super intense orange on the color grading. Sound effect now. I don't exactly see what this is right here. This to me looks a little bit weird. Again, super cool with the long exposure time. And by the way, what you see here is that the camera is actually moving up. If you don't actually manage to move the camera up during a time lapse, which of course is difficult because it involves slider and stuff like this, you can also just scale in a bit and then move the time lapse going up or down with keyframes. And now this is probably the thing that popped out to most people. Here, it's pictures. For 2 frames, picture, 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 picture. And they took a whole bunch of pictures of cabs, and then it's just an entire motion where they kept taking pictures of cabs from the side and then further to the front and then from the other side. It's a montage of a whole lot of pictures. Super cool, right? To even get that idea, that must have been some creative genius who did that. This is also a pretty funny idea. And listen to the sound effect. Even the... So good. Here they wipe it down and then wipe it up into this frame. And this one is another... It looks to me like it's a hyperlapse shot from a boat. That means they took a tripod. They put the tripod in the end of the boat. And then they started a time lapse. And in that time, of course, the boat was moving in the other direction. Oh yeah, do you see it starts slowly and then it's speed ramping? And then here you see must come the cut, where they then continue it actually when they arrived here. It goes from a time lapse on the boat into another hyperlapse that they did here through this gate. Super cool. Look at this, in the end the camera is tilting down and then it goes into the next shot, and here you see that there's a cut because suddenly there are so many more people, and then they start a new recording or a new hyperlapse. And they turn into here. It's like, again, super wide angle here. You see how much they got in the frame. This one was so cool also. Sound effect of how they're cleaning the window. And when they shot this here, I assume they took pictures, so they can be that they took it in such a big resolution that afterwards they decided which person here to track, because I think they're tracking these 2 guys here. Or they even took that time-lapse in the first place following those 2 people. But I think it's actually the first option, because then afterwards you can decide who to track. Look at this. And again, it's whipping up And some fancy hyper zoom transition here with that sound effect, of course. The duck. Listen to the sound effect that they added here while it's actually zooming out of the picture. It's as if though you're turning a wheel on like spectacles or something like this. And the bird sound. And there's so much ambience noise that they put here together. It's like, must be 5, 6, 7 layers of sound effects that they put under this here. So cool. And how the clouds are moving over the houses here. And again, here's the same thing as I said before. Look at the houses here, and then it's slowly moving up and it's changing perspective so that you start seeing those houses back here. So the camera that shot these pictures must have actually moved up during the time lapse, which means I assume it was shot on a drone that was slowly flying upwards. Again, here that same effect going from day to night. And again, the connection that they make between the shots here so nicely, so that you barely even see the cut. Slow zoom in, another like fancy zoom transition. And then what they often do is they zoom into one particular part of the image bigger. And especially when you take a time lapse as pictures, then you can do that because you take the pictures on such a much higher resolution. So for example, if this video was exported in 1080p, but the picture you actually shot in like 20, 30, 40 megapixels of resolution, then you can actually do exactly what they're doing here. Zoom in so close. Zooms back out to the flicker, the sound effect from like a lamp that's turning off. So good. And here first you think about, okay, why is this so unsharp? Then you see, okay, it's a reflection, and they turn it and then they zoom out, and then it suddenly turns into a full time lapse that goes from night to day. And how they connected. Morning in New York City. A lot of this also is timing, right? They have the absolute perfect time where they shot these, and they were really on point with getting the golden hour, getting the sunset, getting the sunrise. So good. Here again, you see that the camera actually is moving slowly to the right. And what makes it more interesting here is that you actually see the foreground. So did you get a feel for from which perspective, from which angle or place was this actually taken from? So good. And then here how it goes into the subway. So here you have a short blur towards the door of the subway, and then there's some kind of super fancy hyper zoom. You could have shot that on a gimbal or just handheld walking through the subway and then just fast forwarding it. And it continues the forward motion and goes into a drone shot that goes forwards and then turns around the Statue of Liberty. And speed ramps, and suddenly it's back to the Empire State Building. And even this one, I'm asking myself how they actually shot it, because you see that whichever camera from whichever angle they took this is going upwards. Otherwise the perspective here on the houses wouldn't change. So you see here, like this gap, for example, between the landscape and the house is getting bigger. That means that the camera is flying upwards, and it's a time lapse that goes from sunny daytime till night. So that means that it must have been like 30, 45, maybe even 60 minutes. How did they shoot it? Tell me how you think that they shot it. Leave it in the comment down below. And if you liked this video, then I hope you subscribe to the channel, and down there is a playlist with lots more of these editing analysis videos. So that's it for today. See you in the next video.